Step softly beyond the edge of history, where memory dims and myth breathes. Here, in the hush between worlds, lie places older than written timestone echoes of forgotten hands. Who built them, and why do they whisper still? Towers without doors, cities drowned without names, spheres too perfect to be chance. They stand not merely as ruins, but as riddles carved in silence. Imagine a world that lived before the stories we tell ourselves began, where knowledge moved without books and vanished without graves. Some structures crumble under weight and weather, but not all. Some wait, they stand in forests, under seas. Ethiopia windswept plateaus, patient as shadow. As you wander these mysteries with me, ask yourself, did we lose their stories, or did they choose to slip away? This is more than history. It is an invitation to wonder where memory ends and deeper. Questions begin. Stone on stone, rising without mortar, each piece laid by hands long turned to dust. In the heart of southern Africa stands something that bends time, a place where silence weighs heavier than history itself. This is Great Zimbabwe, a forgotten capital that once thrived with the breath of 20,000 souls, now only echoing with wind and ghost stories. From afar, the ruins seem simple, piles of rock, sun-bleached and cracked. But step closer, trace the curved walls with your hand, and you realize this was never just shelter. It was memory carved into earth. The most haunting structure is called the Great Enclosure, an immense elliptical wall snaking over 800 feet in circumference, climbing to 36 feet high in places, and so thick you could lay a car sideways atop it. No mortar binds these stones, only the weight of precision. Each granite block chosen, chipped, and set so carefully that they lock together under their own gravity. It's called dry stone architecture, but that sounds too cold. This was living stone, stacked in rhythm, in pattern, as if following some silent drumbeat passed from master to apprentice. There are no straight lines here. No squares, no rigid corners. The wall flows like a river, curving, breathing, almost as if it were meant to mimic the rolling hills around it. Step through the narrow entrance, and you find yourself swallowed by the enclosure's hush. Inside is a labyrinth of passageways and hidden courtyards. But in the center stands something even stranger. A massive solid stone tower, conical, over 30 feet high, rising from the dirt without door or window, utterly hollow of purpose. Archaeologists argue over its meaning. Was it a symbol of royal power, a monument to fertility, or something ceremonial, a spiritual beacon for rituals lost to time? But the truth is, the tower answers nothing. It only deepens the mystery. Because there are no inscriptions here. No stone tablets, no chiseled names. The people of Great Zimbabwe left no written language to whisper their story to us. Only this place, these walls, their sheer audacity to still stand. It's not just architecture that confounds. When European explorers stumbled across Great Zimbabwe in the late 1800s, they refused to believe it was the work of Africans. To them, these walls were too sophisticated, too monumental to have been shaped by local tribes. They concocted wild theories that it was built by Phoenicians, Arabs, even the lost tribes of Israel. Anything to avoid admitting that black Africans had engineered a stone city that rivaled medieval European capitals. They searched desperately for foreign relics, foreign scripts, foreign fingerprints, but the land gave them nothing. Only local tools, local pottery, and local genius. Eventually, even the most stubborn scholars had to admit, this was Shona land, Shona hands. The very name Zimbabwe comes from their language, Jimba Zamabu, houses of stone, yet so much remains unanswered. Why build such a towering fortress here, far from the sea? Was it to guard the region's vast gold resources? 4. Great Zimbabwe was wealthy beyond imagining. Its merchants traded with Persia, India, and even China. Archaeologists have unearthed shards of Ming porcelain, glass beads from Syria, coins from Arabia. Caravans must have wound for months across deserts and savannas to reach this hidden city. But despite all this cosmopolitan trade, the Shona built with local stone. Not mud, not timber, not clay. They chose permanence as if to say, we are here, we matter, and we will endure, and they have, in a way. Though the city itself was abandoned sometime in the 5th-10th century, perhaps due to drought, shifting trade routes, or internal conflict, the walls still stand. Cracked in places, invaded by trees, but standing nonetheless. When you walk there today, the air feels heavy with questions. Why did they leave so completely? Where did they go? There's no evidence of a catastrophic invasion. No mass graves. No blackened burn layers. It's as if one day they simply walked away, leaving the walls to hold their stories. Tourists sometimes say it feels like the place is watching. The curved passageways seem designed to confuse, to make you lose your bearings, to keep secrets tucked behind every turn. Stand by the conical tower at dusk, when shadows stretch long and the walls glow gold under the sinking sun, and you can almost sense the hum of old ceremonies, drums echoing against granite, chants rising up into the dusk. Not echoes of conquest or empire, but of life, marriages, market days, births, dances under starlight. A living city, now only dust. Perhaps that's the real weight of Great Zimbabwe. Not just that it defies racist narratives of African primitivism. Not just that it humbles European castles in scale and ambition, but that it stands silent. It refuses to explain itself. It left no diaries, no boastful plaques. Only stone and mystery. And so it forces us to look harder, to imagine the laughter in its courtyards, the debates in its alleyways, the children who grew up chasing each other along these cool stone paths. And maybe that's why it still grips. U.S. Because it reminds us that history isn't always a written record. Sometimes it's a feeling under your feet, a curve of wall that seems too graceful to be practical, a tower that serves no known function yet feels necessary. It reminds us that greatness doesn't need to shout, sometimes it just waits. And when you stand inside the great enclosure, surrounded by walls older than your oldest family story, you don't hear explanations. You hear your own heartbeat. You hear the wind catching secrets too old to translate. And you realize that not all ruins crumble. Some endure, stubborn and solemn, holding memories we'll never fully unlock. Beneath the quiet canopy of Michigan's Upper Peninsula, where the pines stand solemn and the lakes lie dark and endless, something ancient waits. At first, the forest seems untouched by history, just moss, deer trails, and the hush of wind. Through needles, but look closer. Tucked among the roots and shadows are thousands of shallow pits, some barely more than dimples in the earth, others yawning wide enough to swallow you whole. These scars are not natural. They are the ghost marks of an industry older than writing, older than cities, older perhaps than memory itself. This is where North America's greatest prehistoric miners once worked, and where a mystery as heavy as copper still lingers. Archaeologists estimate there are over 10,000 of these pits scattered across the Lake Superior Basin, dug by hands that never carved their own story into stone. Here, nearly pure copper lay just beneath the surface, up to 99% pure, glittering in veins that seemed to beg for harvest. 6,000 years ago, long before Rome or Athens rose from rock, miners came with stone hammers and clever fire techniques. They heated the copper-bearing rock, then doused it with water, fracturing it, prying it loose. Nearby, countless hammers worn smooth by generations lie abandoned where they last struck. Some pits go down over 20 feet. Others spread out like shallow basins. All of them whisper of effort, of time, of thousands of unnamed lives. But the strangest thing is what's missing. Conservative studies suggest at least 500,000 tons of copper were pulled from this land across millennia. Yet barely a trace remains in local archaeological sites. The copper tools, ornaments, and burial goods found nearby are nowhere close to accounting for such staggering volumes. So where did it all go? Some believe it was traded through vast indigenous networks, carried down river routes, eventually exchanged for shells, obsidian, or stories lost to time. But even then, the numbers fail. The scale of disappearance dwarfs every local use. That gap, the silence between what was mined and what was left behind, has given birth to wilder ideas. In the 19th century, as European settlers puzzled over these ancient pits, some proposed the copper didn't just flow through North America. It crossed oceans. They imagined Phoenician sailors or Bronze Age Greeks crossing the Atlantic to feed the copper-hungry foundries of the Old World. They pointed to chemical analyses suggesting a match between Lake Superior copper and Mediterranean bronze artifacts. They noted ancient shipwrecks found far off course, sunken long before Columbus. Could there have been transatlantic trade routes millennia before textbooks allow? Mainstream scholars shake their heads. They argue such connections rely on coincidence, fringe interpretations of metallurgical data, and our human fondness for fantastic tales. After all, no Phoenician anchor has ever been hauled from Lake Michigan. No Egyptian scroll records a voyage to a distant, icy land. The evidence is too thin, they say. Better to trust what's simpler, that these miners were local, their networks expansive but continental, their legacy dissolved by time. Yet even the simpler truth remains extraordinary. Imagine a society that organized itself to dig thousands of coordinated mines over thousands of years, without ever leaving behind a written language or monumental architecture. No stone cities, no burial pyramids, no reliefs of kings overseeing workers. Just tools and pits, handed from one generation to the next. Knowledge passed not through ink, but through calloused hands and careful eyes. This was civilization without walls, industry without records. And when the copper ran thin, or trade patterns shifted, they moved on, leaving only hollows in the ground and hammers left where they dropped. Walk through these forests today, and you might miss it all. The pits are softened by centuries of rain and leaf fall, covered in ferns, disguised by sun-dappled moss. The hammers lie still, half-sunken loam, patiently waiting for someone to notice. If you stand very quietly, you can almost feel the memory here. The swing of heavy stone, the hiss of water on glowing rock, the quiet triumph of raw copper pried free. Then the ghost of a question. Who carried it away, and why is there so little left to tell their tale? Maybe we'll never know. Maybe that's the true shape of this mystery. Not just the missing copper, but the missing names, missing faces, missing songs that must once have echoed through these woods. This was once a bustling place, alive with labor and laughter, the heart of a continent's oldest industry. Now, it lies hushed, held by trees that root through forgotten ambitions. And if you look long enough, you start to wonder whether the real treasure wasn't the copper at all, but the haunting realization of how easily even great human enterprises can vanish, swallowed by time, leaving only riddles carved in earth. Deep in the humid jungles of Costa Rica, where banana plantations now creep over old forest beds, hundreds of silent sentinels wait beneath the canopy. They are not carved idols, not ancient thrones, not crumbled temples, but perfectly round stones. Nearly 300 of them have been found, some small enough to cradle in 2 hands, others towering taller than a man and weighing over 15 tons. They sit quietly on grassy knolls, beneath roots or half buried in the soil as if trying to return to the earth. Locals call them Las Bolas, the balls. They were first discovered in the 1930s when workers for the United Fruit Company were clearing land for plantations. Bulldozers shuddered to a halt, blades scraping stone. What emerged from the churned dirt was more than anyone expected. Smooth, spherical boulders, so symmetrical it seemed impossible. They were crafted by ancient hands without modern tools. Their symmetry is what stirs the imagination most. Made predominantly from granodiorite, a rock so hard that even today it requires diamond-tipped tools to shape precisely, these spheres are marvels of craftsmanship. Some are polished to such a finish that water glides off without a ripple. How did pre-Columbian people achieve this? What chisels or sanding techniques could turn rugged stone into perfect geometry? No one knows for certain. The culture responsible left no writings, no blueprints, no chisels scattered in workshops. Only the spheres remain. Equally haunting is their mystery of purpose. Unlike tombs or temples, the spheres carry no inscriptions, no names of kings or priests, no stories etched into their flanks. They are blank, mute to our questions. The indigenous people of Costa Rica today do not claim them. To them, the spheres were already old when their ancestors spun myths around them. Archaeologists have found some spheres arranged in lines, triangles, or even spirals. A few align with astronomical events, their positions marking solstices or equinoxes like a calendar cast in stone. But these patterns are incomplete, many spheres having been moved or damaged over decades by looters or even landowners rolling them into town squares for decoration. Without their original positions, it's almost impossible to decipher the code, if there ever was one. Theories multiply in the silence. Some suggest these were status symbols, placed by chiefs outside their homes to display power, the way marble fountains once marked Roman villas. Others argue they were spiritual instruments, aligned with the cosmos to channel sacred energy or track time. More romantic voices whisper of burial markers for great warriors, although no bones or ashes lie beneath them. Then there are legends. Local tales say the spheres contain gold at their core, a gift from the gods, though none split open have revealed treasure, only more stone. Some believe they were dropped by giants or shaped by divine hands to guard secrets of the forest. The most daring speculations stretch to lost civilizations, a vanished culture so advanced it understood geometry and astronomy at levels we barely grasp today. Even wilder ideas point across oceans, proposing that these spheres connect to global patterns like the stone heads of Easter Island or the perfectly balanced megaliths of Europe. Could they all be fragments of some ancient, interconnected memory, scattered when the world was younger and its people knew things we've forgotten? Yet the truth is likely more human and perhaps more profound. To carve hundreds of these spheres from hard rock, shape them to near perfection, transport them through dense jungle without iron tools or wheels, and place them in deliberate formations, this alone speaks volumes. It speaks of organized labor, of artisans who passed down exact methods through generations, of a society that found meaning in the shape of a sphere. Perhaps for them, perfection itself was sacred. Today, many of these stones are protected by Costa Rica's heritage laws, but the jungle still hides unknown numbers. New spheres continue to surface, unearthed by rains or construction. Each discovery deepens the mystery, expands the map of what this forgotten people left behind, and so they endure, not shouting their significance, not crumbling under the weight of centuries, simply waiting. As the sun moves across the sky and shadows slip over their curves, it's easy to feel that these spheres are more than remnants. They are questions etched in rock, puzzles that outlast every empire. In a way, they still do their silent work drawing us closer, pulling us into wonder, reminding us that not all stories are told in words. Some are told in shapes that defy time, standing watch in the quiet jungles long after the hands that made them have turned to dust. High in the Andes Mountains of Peru, nearly 12,000 feet above sea level, lies a plateau where the air grows thin, the wind feels alive, and the silence presses against your ears like a hand. This is Marahuasi, a place few outside of Peru have ever heard of, yet none forget once they stand among its stones. At first glance, it looks like a rugged stretch of windswept rock, An ordinary outcrop beaten by centuries of rain and frost. But linger, and shapes begin to emerge from the gray. A giant human face stares out across the horizon, lips parted as if whispering secrets to the clouds. Nearby, a stone seems to crouch like a lion, paws folded, eyes forever watchful. Elsewhere, what looks like a perfect seat complete with squared edges and a carved backrest, waits as though for some ancient ruler to return. Pillars rise side by side, capped by a slab like the lintel of a forgotten gate, forming what locals call the stone portal. Mainstream geologists wave this all away. They say erosion is a patient artist, that given enough time, wind, and water can carve illusions from rock faces animals. Temples our brains merely stitching familiar patterns from random shapes. It's called pareidolia, a trick of perception. Yet Marawasi feels different. The sheer density of these figures, the way so many appear so close together, all in one elevated place, strains the limits of coincidence, some researchers believe. This plateau was once a sacred site for a civilization older than history remembers. That perhaps these forms were intentionally shaped, not for shelter, but for meaning. Peruvian doctor and explorer Daniel Russo spent years mapping Marawasi in the mid-20th century. He called it a stone library, convinced that its figures recorded stories of a global catastrophe that wiped out advanced cultures long before our written past began. In Russo's eyes, these were not random sculptures, but messages in stone, left to survive floods, fires, even the collapse of memory itself. Walk among these formations and the questions only grow sharper. Some shapes don't fit at all. Elephants seem to appear in stone, though elephants never roamed South America. There are shapes that resemble sphinx, lions, creatures of Africa or Asia, continents and ocean away. Are these coincidences, or fossil memories from a time before continents tore apart, or when seafarers crossed the world long before our textbooks allow? The mystery of Marawasi isn't just visual, it's visceral. Travelers report hearing voices on the wind, soft chanting, murmurs that fade when you strain to catch the words. At night, locals say lights drift among the stones, moving deliberately, weaving between the formations before vanishing without a trace. Compass needles switch strangely in certain areas, magnetic fields dancing to some tune we cannot hear. Yet for all its allure, Marawasi remains mostly untouched by serious excavation. No sprawling digs, no protective fences, barely even signs to mark its wonders. The Peruvian government has done little to study or promote the site. Some whisper it's safer that way, that the mountain wants its secrets kept. Others believe it's because the implications are too vast, threatening the neat timelines of human progress we hold dear. Skeptics insist this is all fantasy, that these stones are no different from oddly shaped clouds or twisted trees, our minds desperate to see patterns. But even they pause when faced with the sheer scale. How does so much chance art cluster here, high above the fertile valleys, as if drawn by some magnet? Why do some formations align with solar events, casting precisely angled shadows during solstices and equinoxes, marking time in ways eerily like ancient calendars? Standing there, it's easy to believe you've stepped into a forgotten myth. The air feels charged, heavy not just with altitude, but with story. If you sit quietly long enough, letting the mist drift around you, watching faces emerge and fade as the clouds part and close, you begin to wonder, what if memory itself is carved into these stones? What if these shapes aren't accidents, but echoes, artifacts of a time when carving a story into a mountain was the only way to ensure it would outlast flood, war, and oblivion? Marawasi may never yield its answers. No inscriptions declare its builders. No bones or tools have been found to anchor it to a known people. It sits on the edge of what we accept and what we fear to imagine, a place where geology and geometry seem to blur, where stone stands watch over secrets too old for words. Maybe that's why it still draws us. In an age of satellites and laser, Scans of histories neatly catalogued and carbon dated, Marawasi remains stubbornly, beautifully unexplained. A testament to how little we truly know, and how much still waits silent, patient, wrapped in stone and cloud, just beyond the edge of memory. Just off the southern coast of Greece, where the gentle waves of the Aegean lap against its sunlit shores, something ancient lies hidden beneath the blue. Only 12 feet below the surface, so shallow that on calm days you can see its outlines. From a boat rests a city lost to time, Pavlo Petri. It was found almost by accident in 1967, when oceanographers surveying the seabed noticed strange, rectangular shapes that no shifting current or playful fish could have created. When divers descended, they didn't find scattered ruins or the jagged remnants of a single collapsed temple. Instead, they floated over an entire city streets paved in stone. Multi-room houses complete with courtyards, walls that still form tight angles, and what appears to be a cemetery. A city perfectly laid out, just waiting, as if the sea had decided to keep it safe. What stunned archaeologists wasn't merely its existence, it was its age. Carbon dating of pottery shards and architectural clues suggest Pavlo Petri thrived 4,000 years ago, possibly even earlier. That pushes it well before the classical Greek period most people associate with civilization in this part of the world. Some scholars cautiously propose dates that stretch back over 5,000 years, meaning Pavlo Petri may have been bustling long before Homer ever sang of Troy, wandering through its ghostly avenues now ruled by fish and soft corals. It's clear, this was no crude settlement. The city had urban planning, a grid of streets, houses arranged logically, drainage channels that hinted concerns for hygiene and daily comfort. There's evidence of workshops, wide public squares, and even structures that could have served as temples or gathering halls. This was a society that understood architecture, civic life, and community centuries before most textbooks suggest such complexity bloomed in Europe. Yet for all its order, Pavlo Petri holds tight to its secrets. There are no surviving records of who lived here. No written texts unearthed in clay jars. No grand stele proclaiming kings or conquests. Even local myths offer no clear memory of a city swallowed by the sea. Whoever these people were, they left only silent stone to speak for them. And then comes the most haunting question of all. Why did it sink? Some scientists believe a massive earthquake struck around 1000 BCE, rupturing the seabed and dragging the land downward in a geological heartbeat. Others think a series of tsunamis may have battered the coast, gradually eroding foundations until the sea simply poured in and made the city its own. Whatever happened, it was sudden enough that the inhabitants didn't rebuild. They left or were lost, and the waters covered their world like a shroud. Today, Pavlo Petri remains remarkably intact because the sea, in its gentle way, became a guardian. Unlike windswept ruins on land, vulnerable to looters or the grinding march of time, Pavlo Petri lies under a protective blanket of water and sand. When archaeologists digitally mapped the site using sonar and 3D imaging, they revealed entire blocks of houses still standing in neat rows. Kitchens, hallways, courtyards, all exactly where their builders placed them thousands of years ago. More tantalizing still are hints that Pavlo Petri wasn't just a quiet fishing village. Artifacts pulled from nearby waters suggest it was part of a bustling trade network linking Minoan Crete, the Mycenaean mainland, and possibly even Egypt. Pottery styles, dyes, and metal objects found in the surrounding seabed point to merchants who traveled far, bringing with them stories and goods from across the known world. Yet with no written language to guide us. These are just careful guesses, threads we pull from the silent loom of the sea. Maybe that's why Pavlo Petri exerts such power over the imagination. Unlike cities we know through chronicles and stone inscriptions, Pavlo Petri exists as a question mark drawn across the ocean floor. Some divers describe the eerie feeling of swimming down its streets. sunlight filtering through waves to cast rippling shadows where once families might have gathered, children might have played. Fish dart through doorways that once framed human lives. The gentle currents that swirl dust from the thresholds feel almost like ghosts, exling. And so, Pavlopetri rests in a kind of timelessness. It is not a ruin destroyed by war or desecrated by later generations. It simply sank. Its inhabitants may have looked up from their market stalls one day to see water where land had always been, a tide that never retreated. And when they left, the city waited century after century until someone finally noticed strange shapes beneath the waves. Today, few tourists visit. There is no museum hovering above with carefully labeled plaques, no crowd snapping photos. Pavlopetri remains mostly to itself, a city half-claimed by seagrass and sunbeams, whispering of a time when history wasn't yet written, only lived. Asterisk. Hidden deep within the vast cold wilderness of central Russia, far from any modern highways or neon glow, the Ural Mountains reach just off the southern coast of Greece, where the gentle waves of the Aegean lap against sunlit shores. Something ancient lies hidden beneath the blue. Only 12 feet below the surface, so shallow that on calm days you can see its outlines from a boat rests, a city lost to time. Pavlo Petri. It was found almost by accident in 1967, when oceanographers surveying the seabed noticed strange, rectangular shapes that no shifting current or playful fish could have created. When divers descended, they didn't find scattered ruins or the jagged remnants of a single collapsed temple. Instead, they floated over an entire city streets paved in stone, multi-room houses complete with courtyards, walls that still formed tight angles, and what appears to be a cemetery. A city perfectly laid out, just waiting, as if the sea had decided to keep it safe. What stunned archaeologists wasn't merely its existence, it was its age. Carbon dating of pottery shards and architectural clues suggest Pavlopetri thrived 4,000 years ago, possibly even earlier. That pushes it well before the classical Greek period most people associate with civilization in this part of the world. Some scholars cautiously propose dates that stretch back over 5,000 years, meaning Pavlopetri may have been bustling long before Homer ever sang of Troy. Wandering through its ghostly avenues now ruled by fish and soft corals, it's clear this was no crude settlement. The city had urban planning, a grid of streets, houses arranged logically, drainage channels that hint at concerns for hygiene and daily comfort. There's evidence of workshops, wide public squares, and even structures that could have served as temples or gathering halls. This was a society that understood architecture, civic life, and community centuries before most textbooks suggest such complexity bloomed in Europe. Yet for all its order, Pavlopetri holds tight to its secrets. There are no surviving records of who lived here. No written texts unearthed in clay jars, no grand stele proclaiming kings or conquests. Even local myths offer no clear memory of a city swallowed by the sea. Whoever these people were, they left only silent stone to speak for them. And then comes the most haunting question of all. Why did it sink? Some scientists believe a massive earthquake struck around 1000 BCE, rupturing the seabed and dragging the land downward in a geological heartbeat. Others think a series of tsunamis may have battered the coast, gradually eroding foundations until the sea simply poured in and made the city its own. Whatever happened, it was sudden enough that the inhabitants didn't rebuild. They left or were lost, and the waters covered their world like a shroud. Today, Pavlopetri remains remarkably intact because the sea, in its gentle way, became a guardian. Unlike windswept ruins on land, vulnerable to looters or the grinding march of time, Pavlopetri lies under a protective blanket of water and sand. When archaeologists digitally mapped the site using sonar and 3D imaging, they revealed entire blocks of houses still standing in neat rows. Kitchens, hallways, courtyards, all exactly where their builders placed them thousands of years ago. More tantalizing still are hints that Pavlo-Petri wasn't just a quiet fishing village. Artifacts pulled from nearby waters suggest it was part of a bustling trade network linking Minoan Crete, the Mycenaean mainland, and possibly even Egypt. Pottery styles, dyes, and metal objects found in the surrounding seabed point to merchants who traveled far, bringing with them stories and goods from across the known world. Yet with no written language to guide us. These are just careful guesses, threads we pull from the silent loom of the sea. Maybe that's why Pavlo-Petri exerts such power over the imagination. Unlike cities we know through chronicles and stone inscriptions, Pavlo-Petri exists as a question mark drawn across the ocean floor. Some divers describe the eerie feeling of swimming down its streets, sunlight filtering through waves to cast rippling shadows where once families might have gathered. Children might have played. Fish dart through doorways that once framed human lives. The gentle currents that swirled dust from the thresholds feel almost like ghosts exhaling. And so, Pavlo-Petri rests in a kind of timelessness. It is not a ruin destroyed by war or desecrated by later generations. It simply sank. Its inhabitants may have looked up from their market stalls one day to see water where land had always been, a tide that never retreated. And when they left, the city waited, century after century, until someone finally noticed strange shapes beneath the waves. Today, few tourists visit. There's no museum hovering above with carefully labeled plaques, no crowds snapping photos. Pavlo-Petri remains mostly to itself, a city half-claimed by seagrass and sunbeams, whispering of a time when history wasn't yet written, only lived. Say like the jagged spine of an ancient beast. This rugged frontier divides Europe from Asia, a boundary not just of continents, but of history, myth, and shadow. And tucked into these forests, nearly swallowed by pine and moss, are stones that refuse to make sense. They are called the Ural megaliths, though. You'll rarely hear that name outside a handful of Russian researchers and local legends. No glossy tourist brochures or museum guides bring you here. Instead, you must journey on foot through dense undergrowth, across icy streams and under dripping branches, until suddenly, looming out of the mist, they appear, colossal blocks of granite, some weighing over 3,000 tons, stacked into walls and terraces that stretch hundreds of feet. Geologists try to soothe the puzzle. They speak of frost wedging and millennia of freeze-thaw cycles that cracked granite into neat rectangles. They cite natural processes that layered stone over eons, insisting these formations are simply nature's patience on display. But walk among them, and doubt creeps in like cold through your coat. Some stones are perfectly squared, their angles so sharp they seem sliced by a diamond saw. Others balance improbably, stacked with near machine-like precision on top of narrow supports, forming platforms and ledges that defy gravity's careless hand. Along certain stretches, long walls of stone rise in near unbroken lines, resembling the retaining walls of a forgotten fortress. No records exist of who might have built these. No pottery fragments, no bones, no ash from ancient fires. Unlike Greece or Egypt, there is no known civilization tied to this wilderness capable of working stone on this scale. Even today, moving a 3,000-ton block would demand engineering marvels. Yet here they sit, settled into the forest floor, as if waiting for someone to remember their purpose. Local legends offer their own explanations. In villages dotting the Ural foothills, stories pass from elder to child of giants who once roamed these woods, stacking stones for their homes, or perhaps altars to unknowable gods. Other tales whisper of a world before the Great Flood, a time when advanced people fled rising waters, carrying with them knowledge now lost. They say the Urals became a refuge, a place to preserve secrets from the catastrophe that swept clean the rest of the earth. Stranger still are reports of magnetic anomalies around these sites. Hikers tell of compass needles spinning wildly, of watches stopping or running fast. Amateur researchers bring handheld instruments that register subtle electromagnetic disturbances. though no mainstream studies have confirmed the effect. Whether these are quirks of local geology or something more is left to speculation, but it all deepens the sense that these megaliths stand outside our comfortable maps of the world. And so the Ural megaliths remain largely untouched. A handful of drone surveys have mapped their outlines, capturing startling aerial images of orderly grids and long corridors between stone rows. Yet serious excavation never came. Russia, with its endless landscape of mysteries, has few resources or perhaps little will to probe such unsettling questions. Better, maybe, to let the stones keep their silence. Skeptics dismiss it all. They point to similar formations elsewhere, places where glaciers or rivers cracked and stacked rocks in ways that look eerily artificial, until closer study proves otherwise. They say humans see patterns everywhere, conjuring architecture from accident, intent from chance, but that only goes so far. Stand before a wall of granite blocks taller than a house, each stone squared as neatly as bricks in a city street, and the explanations begin to taste thin. Why here, deep in a forest with no roads, no ruins of settlements, no evidence of quarries or tools? Why such scale, such apparent deliberation, if there was no hand behind it at all? Perhaps that's why these megaliths cling to obscurity. Unlike Stonehenge or Machu Picchu, there is no global pilgrimage here, no fenced paths or explanatory plaques. The forest grows thick around them, moss trailing down their flanks like velvet cloaks, roots gripping their bases. The stones seem almost to breathe with the earth, part of the landscape, yet undeniably other-heavy with intention, even if the purpose is lost. At dusk, when the last light slides between the trees and shadows pool around the stones, it's easy to feel watched. The silence becomes a presence, and the stories of giants or pre-flood architects no longer sound so fanciful. You find yourself imagining how this place might have looked millennia ago, newly built or newly revealed. A stage for rituals or gatherings no human now remembers. Just off the southern coast of Greece, where the gentle waves of the Aegean lap against sunlit shores, something ancient lies hidden beneath the blue. Only 12 feet below the surface, so shallow that on calm days you can see its outlines. From a boat rests a city lost to time. Pavlo Petri. It was found almost by accident in 1967, when oceanographers surveying the seabed noticed strange, rectangular shapes that no shifting current or playful fish could have created. When divers descended, they didn't find scattered ruins or the jagged remnants of a single collapsed temple. Instead, they floated over an entire city, streets paved in stone, multi-room houses complete with courtyards, walls that still formed tight angles, and what appears to be a cemetery. A city perfectly laid out, just waiting, as if the sea had decided to keep it safe. What stunned archaeologists wasn't merely its existence, it was its age. Carbon dating of pottery shards and architectural clues suggest Pavlo Petri thrived 4,000 years ago, possibly even earlier. That pushes it well before the classical Greek period most people associate with civilization in this part of the world. Some scholars cautiously propose dates that stretch back over 5,000 years, meaning Pavlo Petri may have been bustling long before Homer ever sang of Troy, wandering through its ghostly avenues, now ruled by fish and soft corals. It's clear this was no crude settlement. The city had urban planning, a grid of streets, houses arranged logically, drainage channels that hint at concerns for hygiene and daily comfort. There's evidence of workshops, wide public squares, and even structures that could have served as temples or gathering halls. This was a society that understood architecture, civic life, and community centuries before most textbooks suggest such complexity bloomed in Europe. Yet for all its order, Pavlo Petri holds tight to its secrets. There are no surviving records of who lived here. No written texts unearthed in clay jars. No grand stele proclaiming kings or conquests. Even local myths offer no clear memory of a city swallowed by the sea. Whoever these people were, they left only silent stone to speak for them. And then comes the most haunting question of all. Why did it sink? Some scientists believe a massive earthquake struck around 1000 BCE, rupturing the seabed and dragging the land downward in a geological heartbeat. Others think a series of tsunamis may have battered the coast, gradually eroding foundations until the sea simply poured in and made the city its own. Whatever happened, it was sudden enough that the inhabitants didn't rebuild. They left or were lost, and the waters covered their world like a shroud. Today, Pavlopetri remains remarkably intact because the sea, in its gentle way, became a guardian. Unlike windswept ruins on land, vulnerable to looters or the grinding march of time, Pavlopetri lies under a protective blanket of water and sand. When archaeologists digitally mapped the site using sonar and 3D imaging, they revealed entire blocks of houses still standing in neat rows. Kitchens, hallways, courtyards, all exactly where their builders placed them thousands of years ago. More tantalizing still are hints that Pavlopetri wasn't just a quiet fishing village. Artifacts pulled from nearby waters suggest it was part of a bustling trade network linking Minoan Crete, the Mycenaean mainland, and possibly even Egypt. Pottery styles, dyes, and metal objects found in the surrounding seabed point to merchants who traveled far, bringing with them stories and goods from across the known world. Yet with no written language to guide us. These are just careful guesses, threads we pull from the silent loom of the sea. Maybe that's why Pavlopetri exerts such power over the imagination. Unlike cities we know through chronicles and stone inscriptions, Pavlopetri exists as a question mark drawn across the ocean floor. Some divers describe the eerie feeling of swimming down its streets, sunlight filtering through waves to cast rippling shadows where once families might have gathered, children might have played. Fish dart through doorways that once framed human lives. The gentle currents that swirl dust from the thresholds feel almost like ghosts, exling. And so, Pavlopetri rests in a kind of timelessness. It is not a ruin destroyed by war or desecrated by later generations. It simply sank. Its inhabitants may have looked up from their market stalls one day to see water where land had always been, a tide that never retreated. And when they left, the city waited, century after century, until someone finally noticed strange shapes beneath the waves. Today, few tourists visit. There is no museum hovering above with carefully labeled plaques, no crowds snapping photos. Pavlopetri remains mostly to itself, a city half claimed by seagrass and sunbeams, whispering of a time when history wasn't yet written, only lived. High in the Bekaa Valley of Lebanon stands a site so colossal that even today, engineers pause to catch their breath. This is Baalbek, known in Roman times as Heliopolis, the city of the sun. It is famed for its soaring columns and grand temples dedicated to Jupiter. But buried beneath those familiar ruins lies something even more confounding. 3 stones so large they seem almost to mock human effort. They are called the trilithon, 3 massive limestone blocks, each weighing an estimated 800 to 1,000 tons, set seamlessly into the foundation wall of the Temple of Jupiter. To stand before them is to feel instantly dwarfed, your sense of scale rattled by the sheer audacity of their placement. Each stone is nearly 70 feet long, over 14 feet high, and more than 10 feet thick, larger than a city bus and vastly heavier. What jolts the imagination is not simply their size, but the mystery of their origin. How did ancient builders quarry these stones, transport them over uneven terrain, and lift them more than 20 feet into place, aligning them so precisely that not even a knife blade fits between? Even today, with powerful cranes and advanced rigging, moving a single block of this magnitude would be an engineering spectacle. Yet here they sit, stacked quietly in a wall erected thousands of years ago, as though it were the simplest task. Mainstream archaeologists attribute the trilithon to the Romans. who expanded Baalbek into a monumental complex starting around the 1st century BCE. They certainly built lavish structures atop these foundations, columns soaring nearly 70 feet, intricate capitals, sprawling courtyards. But the Romans, masterful as they were, left no records detailing how they managed the stones below. And many suspect they didn't place them at all. This is where the story deepens into shadow. Some scholars believe the foundation, including the Trilithon, predates Rome by centuries, perhaps even millennia. They propose that earlier builders whose names and scripts have vanished from memory laid these megaliths long before the legions marched east. The Romans, ever pragmatic, might have found an existing platform of unmatched stability and simply crowned it with their temples. If true, it opens a gaping question. Who were these ancient engineers, and what technology or sheer human force did they command? In the nearby quarry still rests a stone known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, a block even larger, estimated at 1,100 tons, abandoned, perhaps because of a flaw, or because moving it proved impossible even for them. Engineers and historians have spent lifetimes pondering the logistics. Traditional theories revolve around brute manpower, thousands of workers with ropes, wooden rollers, and ingenious leverage systems. But try to scale such methods to these weights, and the math grows shaky. Ropes thick enough to bear the strain would snap under their own weight. Wooden rollers would shatter. Ramps would have to be enormous, consuming more material than the temple itself. Alternative ideas abound, many drifting into the fringe. Some suggest lost ancient machinery, counterweights, cranes, or sledges operating on principles we've since forgotten. Others whisper of sonic levitation, a mythical technology that harnessed vibration to lift stone. More audacious theories reach into the stars, proposing that Baalbek's colossal stones were set in place by visitors not of this earth, their legacy left as inscrutable testaments to an otherworldly hand. Of course, no direct evidence supports such claims. There are no blueprints of anti-gravity devices buried in the soil, no carvings of strange beings with futuristic tools. But standing before the Trilithon, feeling the shadow of their mass loom across your chest, it's easy to understand why human minds reach for explanations that break our earthly bounds. And still, the stones offer no inscriptions, no chiseled tales to soothe our curiosity. They rest, silent and immovable, bearing the weight of time as easily as they bore the temples of gods. Beneath them, the ground remains stable, the wall unbowed by centuries of earthquake and war. It is as if the very earth chose these blocks to root civilization itself, anchoring all that followed. Even today, engineers marvel. In the 1990s, modern attempts to move comparable weights with hydraulic cranes in Germany became complex logistical feats requiring months of planning and the most advanced machinery available. Yet at Baalbek, thousands of years ago, someone not only moved these giants but aligned them with an elegance that still staggers architectural study. So we are left with two stories. One is the cautious tale told by textbooks, industrious builders, ropes, wood, and sweat, combined with clever Roman engineering atop older foundations. The other is older, whispered among the stones themselves, a story without names or dates, where technology surpasses what we comfortably believe was possible, or where humanity's own forgotten genius once reached heights we've since let slip. At dusk, as the sun sets behind Lebanon's mountains and the ruins glow amber, the Trilithon stands half in light, half in shadow. Tourists snap pictures, marvel briefly, then move on. But if you linger, if you press your hand to the cold, ancient limestone, you feel not only its solidity, but a pulse of mystery, a sense that these stones remember something we do not. And perhaps that is their greatest weight of all. In the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, under the blazing sun and shifting winds, lies a place that quietly rewrites the story of civilization. This is Göbekli Tepe, a name meaning Potbelly Hill, which for millennia was just that. Dusty rise on the landscape, grazed by sheep, ignored by history, until archaeologists began to dig and the earth reluctantly surrendered its secret. What they found astonished the world. Buried beneath layers of sediment were massive T-shaped stone pillars, some soaring nearly 20 feet high, intricately carved with foxes, snakes, boars, birds, and abstract symbols. These stones formed circular enclosures, temples, or sanctuaries, perhaps older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years, older even than the first cities. Carbon dating places Göbekli Tepe's construction around 9600 BCE, in the murky twilight between the Ice Age and recorded time. To grasp the magnitude of this, consider what humans were supposed to be doing then. Conventional timelines had us still wandering in small bands, foraging, hunting with flint-tipped spears. Agriculture was still thousands of years away. No writing, no pottery. And yet here stand monumental pillars, some weighing over 10 tons, arranged with astronomical precision, decorated with a language of symbols we have yet to decode. Who built this? How did nomadic hunter-gatherers marshal the planning, labor, and vision to raise such marvels? To carve limestone so expertly? And perhaps most haunting, why? Archaeologists like Klaus Schmidt, who led the excavation from the 1990s until his death in 2014, proposed that Göbekli Tepe was not a village, it was a temple, the world's first known place of large-scale ritual gathering. People may have come from hundreds of miles away to meet, celebrate, worship, or mourn, laying the foundation for cooperation that eventually birthed agriculture and cities. In this telling, religion did not grow out of settled life. Life grew out of places like Göbekli Tepe. But then comes the strangest twist. Around 8000 BCE, after centuries of use, the builders deliberately buried their masterpiece under tons of rubble. Layer by layer, enclosure by enclosure, they entombed their own creation. No enemy destroyed it. No flood or fire forced them out. They themselves covered it, as if hiding a secret too sacred or too dangerous to remain in the light. What could drive people to erase their own monument? Some speculate it was part of a ritual closure, marking the end of an era. Others wonder if shift in climate patterns, new social tensions, or the emergence of agriculture itself made the site obsolete. Its gods no longer needed. Or perhaps they feared something, the power held by these stones, the gatherings they inspired, the stories carved into their sides. In burying it, they preserved it perfectly for us, thousands of years later, to stand dumbstruck in the Anatolian dust, and we are left with eerie details that only deepen the mystery. The animal carvings, are they totems, spirits, myths? Some researchers suggest the images represent constellations, an early star map encoded in stone. Others see tales of creation and destruction, fertility and death, the endless cycles of life. Etched by hands we will never know, the pillars themselves almost seem alive. They are not just columns. Many are carved with abstract arms and hands, as though towering human figures stand in eternal conference, silently holding up the sky. Between them are low stone benches. Did people sit here in awe, chant prayers, conduct rites we can't imagine? Critics argue that perhaps Göbekli Tepe is not quite so unique, that other similar sites may yet lie hidden beneath the Near East's fields and hills, waiting for archaeologists to find them. Even so, nothing uncovered so far rivals its scale or complexity at such an early date. It stands alone, a colossal anomaly that scholars still struggle to fit into humanity's story. And there is still so much we don't know. Large portions of the hill remain unexcavated, deliberately left, so by cautious teams who fear exposure may bring damage faster than conservation can keep pace. It's possible entire new circles, new carvings, new answers, or new questions sleep just meters beneath the surface. At Göbekli Tepe, history and prehistory merge into a single breathless question. If people 12,000 years ago could build this before farms, before writing, before even the wheel, then what else did they know? That we have lost? What gods did they fear or honor? What stories did they chant under the stars that we can no longer hear? Standing there today, among the dusty trenches and roped-off pillars, you feel less like you're visiting ruins and more like you're trespassing on a dream, half remembered by the earth itself. The stones are silent, but their silence is weighty, like a breath held for millennia. Perhaps buried in their carvings, there's a message for us, a reminder that civilization's roots run deeper and stranger than we dare to believe. Deep in the blazing heart of the Sahara Desert, where the sun pounds the dunes into rippling waves of gold, something peculiar happens. Explorers have long reported that, in certain remote stretches, compasses spin uselessly, pointing not north, but in erratic circles, as if confused by secrets buried beneath the sands. It's a small phenomenon with enormous implications, a whisper that under this vast emptiness, something powerful and ancient still exerts its pull. The Sahara is the largest hot desert on Earth, stretching nearly 3.6 million square miles across North Africa. It's a graveyard of forgotten rivers and fossilized lakes, once lush with forests and teeming with animals. Thousands of years ago, this was not an ocean of sand, but a land alive with green. People lived here, hunted here, built communities, along watering holes now lost beneath the dunes. As the climate shifted and rains retreated, the desert advanced, swallowing everything in its path. What it left beneath the dunes is still largely unknown. Modern travelers occasionally stumble into zones of magnetic disturbance. Compasses behave erratically. Sometimes even GPS devices struggle for accuracy. Scientists point to natural explanations, iron-rich deposits, or volcanic rocks, capable of distorting local magnetic fields. The Sahara's geology is complex, a patchwork of mineral seams and buried craters. But for some researchers and adventurers, the odd readings spark deeper curiosity. They wonder if the disturbances hint at something more, the remnants of vast, long-forgotten human endeavors. Legends among local nomadic tribes speak of cities swallowed by sand, their towers and streets still intact far below. There are old stories of caravans that vanished after crossing certain cursed regions, their guides struck with confusion when their compasses spun wildly, unable to find the stars, as if some force beneath the earth had reached up to steal their sense of direction. In the mid-20th century, French and German archaeological teams documented unusually dense subsurface anomalies under parts of the Sahara. Ground-penetrating surveys revealed vast shapes, grids, and lines that suggested walls or roadways. Some researchers speculated these might be the remains of ancient mining complexes, where early civilizations extracted copper, gold, or even meteor iron. Such large-scale activity would have required remarkable organization and technology. Could their abandoned pits or reinforced shafts still generate subtle magnetic signatures? There are even wilder theories. Some alternative historians claim that under the Sahara lie megalithic structures older than Egypt's pyramids, massive stone installations that predate our written record by millennia. If so, they could contain ferrous materials or geomagnetic properties capable of skewing a compass. These ideas are often dismissed by mainstream scholars as speculative at best, fantastical at worst. After all, shifting dunes bury and reveal ruins constantly. Any direct evidence would be extraordinarily difficult to excavate, and most formal digs never return. Too costly, too remote, too risky. Yet tantalizing clues persist. In 2018, satellite imagery picked up faint rectilinear patterns deep within the Algerian Sahara, far from any known settlement. The lines formed near perfect right angles across several kilometers, vanishing under newer dunes. Could they be traces of forgotten foundations, or simply unusual geological fractures? No one knows. but the magnetic anomalies cluster close by, as if whatever lies beneath still exerts a silent, restless influence. Meanwhile, local Tuareg guides tell tales passed down through countless generations of ancient beings who built with stone and star knowledge, then disappeared, leaving only ghost fields of magnetism behind. They believe the desert is alive, that it remembers, that it sometimes tries to speak. Many refuse to camp near certain dunes at night, claiming the air feels wrong there, heavy with static, the sands whispering with voices no one else can hear. Of course, natural explanations do offer compelling answers. The Earth's crust is far from uniform. Massive iron ore deposits run beneath the Sahara, and ancient impact sites like the Richet structure in Mauritania, a colossal eroded dome visible from space, can disrupt local magnetic readings. These phenomena might fully account for spinning compasses. But even knowing that, it doesn't dispel the deeper mystery. If early humans found these mineral-rich zones, did they exploit them? Did they build here, only to be lost to shifting climate and relentless sand? Imagine standing on a high dune, your feet sinking slightly as fine grains slide past. You hold a compass, watch it twitch and turn, refusing to settle. The horizon stretches in every direction, a vast ocean of emptiness under a blazing sun. Somewhere underfoot, perhaps only dozens of feet below, could be stone walls or collapsed mine shafts, iron tools rusted into lumps, inscriptions worn smooth by time. Or maybe nothing at all, only the ghost of an old magnetic swirl in the bedrock, tricking us into thinking there's more. But that's the power of places like this. They leave space for wonder. The Sahara's magnetic puzzles challenge our certainties, inviting stories where data runs thin. Perhaps no buried civilization waits to be found. Perhaps the compass spins only because of rocks. But each erratic needle still points to an ancient landscape that once knew forests, rivers, and cities, a landscape that might still clutch secrets in its depths, waiting for wind and curiosity to uncover them. And until someone digs deep enough, or the desert shifts just right, we're left with the haunting dance of compass needles under an indifferent sun, reminding us that even in a modern world of satellites and sensors, there are still places that quietly refuse to give up their truths. Hidden beneath the emerald canopy of the Amazon rainforest, where vines twist around towering trunks and parrots dart like living jewels, lies a secret that even local tribes did not fully suspect. It was only with the advent of satellites and aerial surveys that researchers began to notice strange patterns peeking through gaps in the treetops. Enormous squares, circles, and interconnected lines cut into the earth, stretching across thousands of miles. These are the Amazon geoglyphs, geometric earthworks that whisper of civilizations long forgotten. For centuries, the dominant image of the Amazon was that of an untouched wilderness, hostile to large-scale human habitation. Early European explorers returned with tales of thick jungles and scattered tribes, leading historians to believe this was always a sparsely populated frontier. But in the last few decades, discoveries of these massive earthworks have shattered that old narrative. The geoglyphs first came to wider attention in the late 1970s when deforestation for cattle pastures in Brazil began exposing vast, perfectly symmetrical trenches. As more trees fell, more shapes appeared. Circles linked by straight lines, giant squares with entrances aligned to cardinal points, even complex maze-like forms. Today, researchers have cataloged over 450 distinct geoglyphs across the western Amazon basin, with many more surely still hidden under the thick forest cover. What is striking is not just their sheer size. Some geoglyphs span more than 1,000 feet across, but their deliberate precision. The ditches are often 4 feet deep and 30 feet wide, dug in nearly perfect lines and arcs. Some are so exact that modern engineers have marveled at their consistency, wondering how ancient builders achieved such symmetry without aerial perspectives or advanced surveying tools. Carbon dating of charcoal found in and around these sites suggests that many were constructed between 2000 and 2500 years ago, well before the rise of the Inca Empire. Some may even be older. Yet no one knows exactly who built them. The creators left no written records, no standing stone temples like those in Peru, no large statues or inscriptions. Only the shapes carved into earth itself, massive, mute testimonies to a vanished culture. What were these geoglyphs for? Archaeologists debate fiercely. Some believe they were ceremonial gathering places, perhaps for seasonal rituals that drew people from scattered communities. The alignments to the solstices and other astronomical points hint at a possible calendar function, marking the passage of time for agricultural or spiritual reasons. Others suggest they could have been territorial markers, or even the remains of a network of roads and plazas for a densely settled region. This last idea overturns another long-held belief that the Amazon's poor, acidic soils could never support large populations. But evidence now points in the opposite direction. Hidden beneath the forest floor, scientists have found terra preta, or black earth, a rich human-made soil created by mixing charcoal, compost, and broken pottery over generations. These dark patches are remarkably fertile, capable of sustaining intense agriculture in a place where ordinary ground quickly leaches away nutrients. Put together, the geoglyphs and the black earth tell a startling story, that the Amazon was once home to complex societies with sophisticated land management, who shaped their environment on a grand scale. When European diseases swept through after first contact, killing up to 90% of indigenous populations, the jungle simply swallowed their cleared fields and ceremonial sites. Within decades, trees reclaimed the plazas, vines wound over the ditches, and parrots and monkeys returned, unaware they danced above ancient avenues. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the geoglyphs is their silence. Unlike the pyramids of Mesoamerica or the stelae of Andean kingdoms, there are no surviving myths or oral histories among local tribes that clearly tie them to these colossal shapes. It's as if a crucial chapter of human memory was wiped clean, leaving only faint scars on the land. And so, the Amazon geoglyphs stand as elegant riddles, half revealed by logging and satellite imagery, then quickly obscured again by relentless growth. Walk through one of these sites today, if you can find it, and the jungle seems almost normal until suddenly the ground dips in smooth, unnatural curves, forming circles too perfect for nature alone. Stand in the center and look up. The trees close overhead like the arches of a forgotten cathedral. Modern technology has only deepened the mystery. LiDAR scans, which penetrate foliage to map the forest floor, have revealed that these earthworks are far more widespread than once thought, hinting at a vast interconnected network of settlements and ceremonial centers. It suggests that what we've uncovered so far is just the barest glimpse of a sprawling human tapestry woven across the Amazon long before Columbus ever dreamed of ships. In the end, the geoglyphs remind us that the stories of our world are often buried twice: first by time, then by the earth itself. And while the jungle grows indifferent overhead, its roots tangle through the remains of a people who once knew this land intimately, who carved their hopes and calendars into its very soil. They are gone now, but their lines remain, delicate signatures on the vast green skin of the Amazon, still waiting to be fully read. In the quiet county of Kaju, nestled in China's Zhejiang province, lies a mystery quite literally beneath the feet of its people. At first glance, the village of Xianbeikun appears ordinary rice paddies, bamboo groves, and calm ponds, reflecting the sky. But in 1992, when a group of curious villagers decided to deepen a pond to catch more fish, they hit something they never expected: empty air. The pond drained rapidly, revealing the entrance to a vast man-made cavern. What they uncovered would soon challenge everything historians thought they knew about ancient China. This was the first of what are now called the Long Yu Caves, 36 enormous, hand-carved chambers stretching beneath the landscape, connected by intricate passageways, staircases, and halls. Each cave plunges more than 100 feet deep, with ceilings soaring up to 30 feet high. Together, they form an underground complex of astonishing scale and precision, covering over 320,000 square feet. What makes the Long Yu Caves truly breathtaking isn't merely their size, it's their craftsmanship. The walls and ceilings are perfectly smooth, bearing parallel rows of chisel marks that run with mechanical consistency, almost as if brushed by a giant comb. These meticulous patterns cover every inch of stone, suggesting that whoever carved them not only possessed immense labor force but also followed a deliberate aesthetic or symbolic code lost to us. Yet, despite the cave's grandeur, there are no records, none at all, of their creation. Chinese history is rich with chronicles of dynasties, battles, and monumental projects like the Great Wall and the Terracotta Army. But the Long Yu Caves? Not a single mention. No scrolls, no local legends robust enough to explain them. Just silent stone. This absence has led scholars and enthusiasts alike to propose wildly different theories. Some believe the caves may date back over 2,000 years, possibly to the Qin or early Han dynasty, when massive engineering feats were not uncommon. Others suggest they could be even older, hinting at a civilization now vanished from written memory. The style of the caves bears no resemblance to typical Chinese tombs or temples, and importantly, no human remains, altars, or offerings have ever been found within, suggesting these were not burial sites or places of worship. So why were they built? Some researchers think they might have served as underground storage for grain or valuables, protected from enemies and weather. But this seems unlikely given the sheer scale and painstaking artistry involved, far beyond what would be practical for simple storerooms. Others argue they could have been a hidden palace or retreat, or perhaps designed to channel water or serve as vast reservoirs, though there is scant evidence of plumbing or water flow systems. More speculative voices whisper of ceremonial chambers, spaces meant to echo with chants long faded. One of the most haunting aspects of the Long Yu Caves is the silence that seems to fill them. Walk through these dim halls, light flickering across the ripple-like chisel marks, and it feels as if you're trespassing in a place that was never meant to be rediscovered. The acoustics are curious. Sound carries strangely, bouncing off walls in hushed waves. There are moments where the faintest breath seems to linger unnaturally, as if the stone itself remembers voices from millennia ago. Equally baffling is the engineering. Modern architects have studied the caves and marveled at their structural integrity. Despite thousands of years of earthquakes, floods, and the relentless march of time, none of the caves have collapsed. Their ceilings are unsupported by pillars or beams, relying solely on precise calculation and distribution of weight, a testament to engineering knowledge that rivals our own. Even the uniform chisel marks have been suggested to serve a functional purpose, possibly strengthening the walls or controlling moisture. Adding another layer to the enigma is the sheer amount of labor required. By conservative estimates, it would have taken thousands of workers working around the clock many years, perhaps decades, to carve out just one cave using the tools known from ancient China. Multiply that by 36, and the effort becomes almost unimaginable. Who organized this? Who funded such a colossal project, and for what benefit? And then, they simply vanished. Whoever the creators were, they left no inscriptions, no signatures, no trace of triumph or explanation. The caves are as mute as they are majestic. It's as if their builders completed their task, then melted into the fog of history without leaving so much as a rumor behind. Today, the Long Yu Caves have become a modest tourist attraction. Walkways and lights have been installed. Guides lead visitors through their echoing passages, pointing out the repetitive chisel patterns and vast, eerily empty chambers. But even under the glare of electric bulbs, the caves resist being understood. They feel too deliberate to be mere storage, too silent to be mere folly. Stand quietly in one of the great halls, and questions flood in. Why carve dozens of rooms deep into the bedrock with such care, only to let them slip into obscurity? What ceremonies or gatherings might have filled these spaces with torchlight and voices? What was so important that it demanded secrecy beneath the earth, yet not important enough to be remembered in the annals of China's long history? The Longyu Caves remain a masterwork of forgotten ambition, a riddle carved meticulously into the living rock. Like so many ancient mysteries, they suggest a story not merely lost, but perhaps deliberately hidden, a legacy buried so deep that only the curious and the brave ever glimpse its shadow. And in that darkness, one can't help but wonder if the caves were never meant to be found again, standing as a monument to the possibility that some chapters of human history were written only for the earth to keep. Beneath the sunlit stone streets of Paula, Malta, far from the bustle of modern life, lies a mystery carved deep into the earth, the Calcephline hypogeum. At first glance, the entrance is unremarkable, an old doorway tucked among houses, giving no hint of the vast world that waits below. But descend its narrow steps, and you enter a subterranean labyrinth older than the pyramids, echoing with secrets that no one alive can fully decode. The hypogeum was discovered entirely by accident. In 1902, when workers digging foundations for a new housing project broke through its ceiling, what they uncovered was staggering. A sprawling complex of chambers, corridors, and sacred spaces carved entirely out of limestone, stretching down 3 levels over 35 feet below the surface. Archaeologists date its construction to around 4000 BCE, making it over 6,000 years old, one of the oldest known prehistoric underground temples in the world. Walking through the hypogeum feels like stepping into another dimension. The walls curve in organic flowing patterns, arches open into shadowed niches, and polished red ochre paint still clings to the stone in swirling motifs. Strange spiral designs and honeycomb patterns seem to hum with forgotten symbolism. Torchlight or modern lamps reveal carved altars and small round pits that may once have held offerings, food, jewelry, or more macabre gifts. But the most haunting feature of the hypogeum is its acoustics. In a chamber known as the Oracle Room, a person, speaking at normal volume, can have their voice amplified and carried throughout the entire underground complex. Frequencies between 110 and 130 Hz resonate with eerie intensity, vibrating through the walls and the bodies of those who stand inside. Modern acoustic engineers have studied the phenomenon, suggesting the chamber was deliberately tuned to enhance chanting or ritual speech. Some researchers even speculate that extended exposure to these vibrations could induce altered states of consciousness, binding participants more deeply into whatever ceremonies took place here. Who built such a marvel and why? The people of Malta left no written records. Their megalithic temples above ground, like Kagantesia and Tarxene, offer only hints through stone altars and statues of corpulent figures, perhaps goddesses of fertility or life. The hypogeum, hidden below, seems to have served as a complementary underworld, a womb of earth and stone where mysteries of life, death, and rebirth were explored in darkness. This sense of the underworld is reinforced by what archaeologists found within: the remains of over 7,000 individuals, their skeletons stacked inside chambers or arranged in positions that suggested mass burial rituals. Some were placed carefully, curled on their sides as if sleeping. Others seemed almost tossed together, as if in a communal return to the earth. Scholars debate whether these were regular burials, sacrificial victims, or initiates in some rite of passage now lost to memory. There are also the stranger reports, the ones whispered more than written down. Early excavators described discovering elongated skulls among the remains, stretched unnaturally narrow, unlike typical human anatomy. Some fringe theorists leaped on this, claiming evidence of a long-headed race or visitors from elsewhere. Most anthropologists attribute the shape to cultural cranial binding, but even that practice suggests a people deeply concerned with transformation of the body, perhaps as a way to mark social status or spiritual readiness. Then there are the stories of the hypogeum's disorienting effects. Visitors often report feelings of dizziness, sudden cold spots, or the unnerving sense of being watched. Sound seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, whispering along corridors that bend unpredictably. It's easy to imagine priests or shamans leading processions by torchlight, their chants vibrating through the rock, voices doubling back upon themselves until the living felt the breath of the dead. The hypogeum's builders remain anonymous. No inscriptions name them. No local folklore reliably preserves their identity. When their civilization collapsed around 2500 BCE, whether from climate change, resource exhaustion, or conflict, they left behind only stone and silence. Malta continued to be inhabited, but the purpose and power of the hypogeum faded into obscurity, becoming just another riddle tucked beneath the feet of later generations. Modern Malta is protective of this ancient jewel. Visitor numbers are strictly limited to prevent damage from heat and moisture. Only small groups descend each day, moving carefully over floating walkways to minimize contact. Even so, conservationists worry about the fragile balance. The very breath of humans alters the humidity, threatening paint that has endured for millennia. Stand in the oracle room, close your eyes, and hum a single note. Feel it shiver through your chest, travel up into your skull, and dance across the walls. For a heartbeat, you are connected by sound to priests who stood there thousands of years ago, invoking gods or guiding souls through the veil. In that vibration lingers the faintest echo of what the hypogeum was: a cathedral of resonance, a place where stone itself seemed to speak. Ultimately, the hypogeum of Malta is less a monument to what we know and more a testament to all we have forgotten. It challenges the arrogant notion that we moderns stand at the pinnacle of human accomplishment. Sometimes it is the darkness beneath our feet that holds the truest measure of wonder, waiting patiently for us to listen. And as we step carefully back into the sunlight, the memory of that subterranean heartbeat lingers, a gentle reminder that history is deeper, older, and stranger than we ever dared to imagine. In the sun-bleached wilderness of northwestern Saudi Arabia, where the winds carve strange songs through dry canyons, and the heat blurs the very shape of the horizon, there stands a monument that seems to have slipped out of another world. Locals call it simply a rock, but to those who journey across miles of rugged terrain to see it, it appears unmistakably like a giant petrified ship, eternally anchored on a sea of sand. This curious formation lies at the foot of Jebel al-Lawz, a mountain whose very name means mountain of almonds. Rising abruptly from the surrounding plateaus, Jebel al-Lawz has long been steeped in local legend. Some believe it is the true site of the biblical Mount Sinai, where Moses received the tablets of the law. Whether or not that's true, the region teems with stories of prophets, exiles, and cataclysms that reshaped both the land and the hearts of those who dwell there. Against this backdrop, the so-called rock ship feels almost deliberate, as if set there by a giant hand to remind passers-by of ancient journeys. From a distance, it cuts a stark silhouette, its flanks rising from the sand like the hull of a beached galleon. Closer inspection reveals a body scored by what seem to be ribs, and planks with deep fissures running lengthwise that echo the weathered seams of wooden ships. The prow-like front appears to lean slightly upward, forever straining toward a vanished tide. Geologists are quick to point out that the formation is the result of natural erosion, where layers of sandstone and granite have worn away at uneven rates. The desert is an artist with infinite patience, sculpting masterpieces over millennia. They argue that wind and thermal stress split the rock into these haunting shapes, just as similar processes carve arches, pillars, and mushroom rocks. Across Arabia, but for many who stand before it, such explanations feel hollow. The structure is too precise, its lines too evocative of something once built by hands and then transformed by time. This is where folklore rushes in to fill the void left by scientific caution. Among Bedouin tribes, tales circulate that this rock ship was left behind by a mighty flood, the same deluge that, in stories from cultures as far-flung as Mesopotamia and the Andes, swept the world clean and forced humanity to begin anew. In this telling, the ship turned to stone as a sign, a reminder of survival bought through terror. Others reach for even older memories. They whisper of civilizations long before recorded history, seafarers who navigated not oceans but vast inland lakes and rivers that once threaded through Arabia. In their version, the ship was caught in some geological convulsion, an earthquake, a drought so severe it turned water to desert, and over ages, wood became rock, leaving behind this fossil of human endeavor standing in the shadow of the rock. Ship. It is hard not to let the mind drift into such possibilities. The ground is littered with small stones that crunch underfoot, like brittle coral on an abandoned reef. Wind whistles through the cracks and hollows, producing tones eerily close to sighs. There's a palpable sense of waiting here, as if the ship has merely paused on an impossibly long voyage, crewed by ghosts who still watch the dunes for a returning sea. Adding weight to these musings are the broader mysteries of Jebel al-Lawz itself. The mountain is dotted with other peculiar features, split rocks, ancient cairns, even faint petroglyphs of cattle and human figures. Nearby, researchers have identified circles of stones that could be remnants of settlements thousands of years old. Some point to scorched rock faces on the mountain's summit as evidence of divine fire, further entwining the landscape with biblical narratives. And then there are the darker stories of travelers who become disoriented near the rock ship, hearing voices on the wind that call them by name, of electronics behaving strangely, compasses spinning without reason. Whether such tales are born of superstition or something stranger, they ensure that few linger after dusk. From a more grounded perspective, the rock ship serves as a stark illustration of how human imagination meets the raw canvas of nature. Our ancestors were masters at reading meaning into the land, seeing omens and stories written in stone and sky. A rock shaped by wind becomes a testament to survival or a warning from forgotten gods. Even today, visitors often leave small offerings, stones piled in delicate towers, scraps of cloth tied to thorn bushes, as if instinctively paying respect to something older and larger than themselves. In the end, the rock ship of Jebel al-Lawz stands as a reminder of how thin the line is between geology and myth. Science may insist on erosion and fault lines, but standing before that silent prow, it is easy to believe in ancient floods, in voyages across primeval seas, and in a world where the earth still whispers to those who care to listen. When the sun sets and shadows stretch long across the sand, the rock ship seems almost to stir, its contours shifting with the last red light. For a breathless moment, it's possible to imagine it lifting from its sandy berth, gliding once more over waves long vanished, carrying with it stories too old, too sacred, or too terrible to be spoken aloud. High in the arid hills of western Iran, beyond the reach of modern highways and far from the glow of city lights, stands a forgotten ruin draped in superstition. Its crumbling arches and half-buried courtyards once belonged to a fortress or perhaps a small royal retreat. No one is entirely sure. Local shepherds give it a wide berth, claiming it is haunted by the restless spirits of those who died inside its walls. But the ruin's greatest mystery is not who built it or why it fell into silence. It is what was found there: a lantern that burned without flame. The first written account comes from the early 20th century, when a band of European explorers set out to map lesser-known historical sites across Persia. Guided by locals, they arrived at the ruin near dusk, setting up camp under a sagging portico. Among the rubble of old mosaics and shattered pottery, They discovered something extraordinary, a lantern of beaten bronze, still intact despite centuries of neglect. It rested on a stone pedestal in what may have once been a chapel or inner sanctum. At first, it seemed merely an interesting relic until night fell. That's when the explorers realized the lantern glowed. It emitted a steady, soft light that bathed the nearby walls in amber, yet no wick burned, no oil smoked, and no heat radiated from its surface. The men were astonished. They waved their hands above it, touched the metal, even brought out thermometers and early electrical instruments to measure some sign of current or combustion. Nothing. The lantern remained cool, its glow undiminished. Local villagers, when questioned the next day, grew visibly nervous. They warned that the lantern was touched by jinn, cursed by spirits that lived in the ruins, and punished any who disturbed them. They recounted stories of distant ancestors who had tried to remove the lantern, only to be struck by sudden illness or madness. The explorers, of course, laughed off such tales. Enlightenment had reached Europe. Science was the new creed. But even they hesitated when one of their own began to experience night terrors so vivid he refused to sleep indoors, choosing instead to lie under the stars far from the ruin. Determined to understand what they had found, the team decided to transport the lantern back to their base. But when they returned to the sanctuary, the pedestal stood empty. No lantern, no mark of dragging or theft, as if it had simply ceased to exist. The villagers were unsurprised. The spirits reclaimed it, they said. The Europeans could only record their bewilderment in journals that today gathered dust in obscure archives. Modern attempts to verify the story have fallen flat. Skeptics argue it is simply a local ghost tale that became inflated by foreign adventurers eager for mystery. They point out that many cultures have legends of perpetual lamps in Roman tombs that burned for centuries, candles found in medieval crypts still alight, even stories from India and China of lights that defy reason. Most are explained away as exaggerations, misunderstood natural phenomena, or outright fables. Yet the Iranian ruin stands apart. It was documented by multiple independent parties, explorers, traders, even a Soviet archaeological team in the 1930s that noted strange phosphorescent residues on old stone altars. And though no one has produced the lantern itself, local oral traditions continue to insist it was real and dangerous. Some alternative researchers suggest the lantern could have been an artifact of lost ancient technology, perhaps akin to the so-called Baghdad battery clay jars with copper and iron that might have generated weak electrical currents. Could the lantern have held some kind of phosphor or radioactive element that produced light without heat? If so, why didn't it harm those who touched it? Others reach further into speculation, proposing piezoelectric reactions triggered by the shifting stones of the ruin itself, or even unknown chemical processes that decayed too quickly to be thoroughly studied. Then there are the more esoteric explanations. Mystics believe certain places on Earth act as thin spots between worlds, where natural laws grow pliable, and objects or energies slip through. In this telling, the lantern was less an invention and more a phenomenon, a breach where light from somewhere else found momentary expression in our darkened halls. Perhaps that is why it could vanish so completely, leaving no trace beyond fearful whispers. Regardless of what it was, the legend of the lantern that burned without flame persists. Travelers still venture to the ruin, hoping to glimpse something of its ghostly glow. Most find only silent stones and the restless wind. But occasionally, someone claims to have seen a faint luminescence dancing in the shadows, gone before it can be captured on camera, leaving behind a chill that has nothing to do with the desert night. In the end, the story of the lantern is less about solving a mystery than about embracing wonder. It stands as a quiet rebuke to our modern arrogance, a reminder that not all things must be pinned down and dissected. Some stories are meant to live in the half-light, in that trembling space where folklore, memory, and the unknown intermingle. And So the ruin keeps its vigil under the Iranian stars, and the villagers still leave small offerings at its crumbling gate-flat stones, dried flowers, even drops of sweet tea poured on the ground. Perhaps they do this out of fear, or perhaps out of reverence for forces larger than themselves. Either way, the lantern remains, whether as a memory, a caution, or a hope, burning softly on the threshold of myth. High in the windswept Andean plateau of Peru lies a curious haunting site called Marahuasi. It's a place of strange stone shapes scattered across barren hills, weathered by centuries yet still startling in their familiarity among the eroded. Rock outcrops are formations that unmistakably resemble animals most astonishingly. What some say looks like an elephant, complete with a sweeping trunk and flared ears. Pause for a moment. Elephants in the high Andes? No fossil record places elephants, prehistoric or otherwise, anywhere near this remote landscape. Yet here is this colossal likeness, looming quietly over the valleys below, raising unsettling questions. How did this image come to exist in a land that never knew such creatures? Some scholars argue it's simply pareidolia, the human brain's compulsion to find patterns and faces in random shapes. Nature can, after all, craft remarkable coincidences. Wind and rain carving suggestive forms over millennia. But the figure at Marahuasi is not alone. Across the world, countless ancient artworks depict animals far from their supposed habitats, unsettling the tidy maps drawn by modern science. In the temples of Göbekli Tepe, carved more than 11,000 years ago in what is now Turkey, we see menageries of creatures, lions, wild boar, birds, serpents, some native, others not. In India's ancient Khajuraho temples, elephants mix with creatures from half a world away. Even stranger, in Mexico's Olmec civilization, colossal heads share artistic motifs with African features, sparking controversial theories about pre-Columbian contact. Skeptics dismiss such links as coincidences of style, or later cultural contamination. Yet at Marahuasi, locals have long told legends of giants who once roamed these lands, shaping stones into totems of a world now lost. Could these shapes be the lingering echo of a time so ancient it predates the landscape we know? A whispered memory of megafauna once wandering South America before vanishing in the Pleistocene extinction? Or is it possible that these carvings, these forms in rock, recall a time before continental drift, when humanity's oldest stories traveled across joined lands? Memories carried by migrating bands who later watched the earth break apart beneath their feet? It sounds fantastical, even absurd, yet human memory is deeper and stranger than we often admit. Oral traditions can carry echoes of events long past the bounds of recorded history, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, even ice ages, all preserved in myth. Then there's the question of artistic transmission. Could seafarers from Africa or Asia have crossed oceans far earlier than textbooks allow, bringing with them tales and images of elephants, lions, or other beasts that found new homes in the art of distant shores? Small boats have braved immense distances. Polynesians settled tiny dots of land scattered across the Pacific with only stars and swells to guide them. Why not similar journeys, long before our accepted timelines? None of this is proven, of course. Mainstream archaeology maintains that most such images either represent local animals now extinct, are purely symbolic, or arise from universal tendencies in human imagination. A trunk might be a stylized serpent. Flared ears could simply be artistic license. Still, these explanations often feel like the safe answer, the least troubling option when faced with mysteries that tug at the edges of what we think we know. Stand before the elephant of Marahuasi at dusk, as shadows stretch across the high stones, and it's hard not to wonder. The air is thin here, crisp with centuries. Local shamans still perform rituals among the rocks, leaving offerings to spirits older than ink or iron. They speak of creatures who once thundered across these high plains, beasts with wide feet, and long memories. Whether they mean literal elephants or something more symbolic is anyone's guess. Further afield, in places like the Tassili Niger Plateau of Algeria, prehistoric cave paintings show unmistakable elephants alongside giraffes, crocodiles, and hippos, animals that once did roam the Sahara when it was a lush grassland. Perhaps Marawosi is a cousin to these visions, a fossil of collective memory etched in stone. Or perhaps the real mystery is us. Why do we feel such a jolt of wonder when we see an out-of-place image, a beast where it shouldn't be? Maybe because it reminds us that history is not a neat path but a tangle of migrations, extinctions, half-remembered stories, and deep-time dreams. Our ancestors wandered under different stars, across different landscapes, and they carried the faces of animals in their minds, sometimes to lands those animals never reached. So we stand before these weathered shapes, tracing trunks and tusks, with our eyes, and feel history slip a little under our feet. Maybe these forms were never meant to be exact records. Maybe they are metaphors for memory itself, rough, eroded, hauntingly familiar, pointing to worlds both real and imagined. In the end, the elephant of Marawosi does what all good mysteries do: it refuses to explain itself. It stands silent on its lonely hill, watching the centuries pass, inviting us to look closer and feel that chill of possibility. Not all art is meant to be understood. Some is meant simply to remind us that the past is far vaster and far stranger than the small stories we tell to keep ourselves comfortable. Memory is a fragile architect. It builds stories out of dust and shadow, mortar them with longing, and paints them in colors that never truly existed. When we stand before a crumbling ruin or gaze at strange marks carved into ancient stone, it is not only the past we see, but our own desire to make sense of it. In this way, memory is both the keeper and the creator of mystery. Throughout human history, countless places have been elevated from mere rubble to legend by the stories we layer upon them. A collapsed wall becomes the remnant of a giant's palace. A circle of stones is not just a gathering place, but a calendar crafted by druids to chart the heavens. The mind resists emptiness. Faced with brokenness, it rushes to fill the void with meaning, with narrative. And over time, these invented meanings harden, becoming traditions passed from mouth to ear, growing richer and stranger as they go. Psychologists have long understood how easily memory can deceive us. Experiments show that with just a suggestion, a simple, "Do you remember when?" people can come to recall entire events that never happened. Their brains will even generate sensory details to flesh out the false memory. The smell of the air, the color of a stranger's coat, the exact cadence of a voice that never spoke. If our personal memories are so porous, so vulnerable to embellishment, what does that say about our collective memories? Consider the way legends wrap themselves around real places. In the Scottish Highlands, there are hills said to be frozen giants, petrified for daring to defy the old gods. The formations exist gnarled, wind-battered rock, but their true story was whispered into being by centuries of fireside tales. In Mexico, sinkholes that collapsed into yawning pits became mouths of the underworld, gateways to Xibalba, where spirits danced and lingered. The landscapes themselves are silent. It is memory that lends them voices. We also see this in more recent mysteries. The copper mines of Lake Superior, the stone spheres of Costa Rica, the unexplained trilithon blocks of Baalbek, all these sites come to us wrapped in inherited wonder. Few living people have watched such feats accomplished by human hands. So, in the space left by uncertainty, memory moves in, often conjuring explanations more fantastical than factual. Perhaps it is easier to believe giants stacked the stones, or that spirits rolled the spheres into place, than to wrestle with the enormity of lost human endeavor. Sometimes, memory doesn't even wait for centuries to pass. It begins reshaping events almost as soon as they occur. Eyewitnesses to the same phenomena often give wildly conflicting accounts. What was once a bright flash of light in the forest becomes, through retelling, a flaming chariot, then a god's arrival. Our need for patterns, for stories, is so powerful that even when facts are thin, we prefer a gripping fiction. Yet this fragility of memory is not entirely a flaw. It is also what makes us deeply human. Our capacity to mythologize allows us to find connection across time. Standing in front of the weathered ruins of Great Zimbabwe, we may not know precisely who walked there, or what prayers they whispered, but in imagining their lives, we pay them a kind of respect. We keep their existence from slipping fully into oblivion. Memory here becomes an act of preservation, even if the details blur. Neuroscientists tell us that memory is reconstructive, not reproductive. Each time we remember, we rebuild the memory, layering it with traces of who we are now. This means our remembrances are not perfect copies, but living tapestries, constantly adjusted by our fears, hopes, and cultural context. No wonder then that entire civilizations vanish, yet continue to exist in echo. The stories we tell about them keep reshaping them, long after their stones have cracked and fallen. This dance between memory and mystery is perhaps why we find old places so intoxicating. They hand us a riddle that cannot truly be solved, inviting us to embroider it with our own interpretations. A simple pile of rocks becomes a lost temple. A ring of earth becomes proof of forgotten astronomers. In doing this, we confess our own hunger for significance. We cannot bear a universe without narrative. So we become authors of the unexplained, scribbling legends into the margins of history. There is also an undercurrent of humility in these stories. By accepting that memory distorts, that our grasp of the past is always part imagination, we keep ourselves open to awe. The ruins remain mysterious, not failures of record keeping, but opportunities to wonder. Perhaps it is better this way. If we knew every purpose of every broken wall and cryptic carving, we might lose the very sense of reverence that drives us to protect them. So when you next stand before an ancient site, whether it's a moss-covered mound in your own countryside, or some staggering megalith across the sea, pause and consider not only the stones, but the stories built upon them. Notice how your own mind tries to draw lines, invent histories, see faces where there are none. This is memory at work, fragile yet powerful, constructing mysteries that may outlast even the hardest granite. In this quiet collaboration between stone and story, we find not just clues to the past, but reflections of ourselves, ever longing, ever weaving tales to fill the empty spaces time leaves behind. What if we have it backward? What if all our museums, our textbooks, our documentaries tracing the steady rise of human brilliance are only telling half the story, missing a hidden prologue that changes everything? It's a thought that creeps in around the edges of late-night conversations, or whispers to us when we stand in the shadow of ruins older than our oldest books. What if we are not the pinnacle of civilization, but the aftershock children playing among the broken columns of something far greater that came before? This is more than idle speculation. Across the globe, we find unsettling traces, technological puzzles in stone, aligned with stars in ways we've only recently learned to replicate. Structures so immense and precise that even our modern cranes strain at their implications. Then there are the cultural echoes, the persistent flood myths from Mesopotamia to Mesoamerica. Tales of golden ages abruptly ended, and cryptic warnings carved into rocks we cannot fully read. Geologists speak of cycles, of Earth's periodic convulsions, ice ages and magnetic shifts, volcanic winters and impact events. Each time, life claws back, civilization rebuilds. But how many times? When we look at sediment layers scarred by cataclysm, we rarely consider that under all that ash and fossilized chaos might lie the bones, not just of animals but of cities, of people who looked up at the stars and told stories of their own lost ancestors. It is tempting to wave this away, After all, isn't it arrogance to believe humans could achieve skyscrapers and microchips before recorded history? But there is a subtler arrogance at work too, the belief that we are the first. That from the moment Homo sapiens emerged, it was a one-way climb toward iPhones and space stations. That there were no ages of brilliance before us, no civilizations that touched the same heights or perhaps different heights, measured in wonders we no longer even recognize. Imagine for a moment that we are the survivors of a cycle, living amid the debris of a world wiped clean by nature's indifferent hand. We look at enigmatic glyphs on ruined walls and invent tales of gods because the truth that they were shopping lists, or treaties, or scientific formulae would only underscore how much we have forgotten. Perhaps when we marvel at myths of sky chariots and luminous weapons wielded by ancient heroes, we are not hearing metaphor, but dim cultural memories of technologies we have yet to rediscover. There's an unsettling humility in this possibility. We build our cities from steel and concrete, but even these mighty structures would not endure 10,000 years without maintenance. In a few millennia, our glass towers would collapse, our highways crumble into ridges under creeping forests. The only lasting signs might be ambiguous. Strange concentrations of metals in the soil, anomalous isotopes that someday perplex a future scientist, or ghostly grids visible only from orbit, etched by roads that once connected us. If civilization is cyclical, it reframes every mystery we've explored. The great enclosure of Zimbabwe, the silent copper mines around Lake Superior, the trilithons at Baalbek, perhaps they were not isolated anomalies of sudden genius, but the relics of an age whose knowledge base was already vast, already inherited from those who came before them. And what we call collapse was simply the latest turning of a wheel that has turned many times. This thought does not have to be bleak. In fact, it can be strangely comforting. It suggests that human ingenuity is a force that rises again and again, regardless of setbacks. That across ages, people will always look up, build monuments, chart the stars, love, fear, dream. The specifics may change stone to iron, to silicon, to something we can't yet conceive, but the essence persists. At the same time, it should humble us. For if we are merely one layer in an ongoing cycle, then the smug certainty that we are the culmination of all history becomes laughable. It urges caution against hubris, against the reckless poisoning of earth and sky, as if nothing could ever reset us to the start. It invites us to look at the stories left behind, myths of floods and fires, warnings of arrogance punished, and wonder whether they are less allegory than feint, recollections of mistakes once made, standing at the edge of some forgotten city, swallowed by jungle, or on a cliff where the wind wails through abandoned towers. It's easy to feel a chill, not just from the physical emptiness, but from the echo of human lives that once filled these places. It is here, in these haunting spaces, that the question strikes hardest. What if we are the after? What if we are not writing the first chapters of civilization's epic, but merely adding our fragile pages to a story so old its beginning is lost even to itself? Perhaps that's why we keep searching ruins and puzzling over inexplicable artifacts, because somewhere deep inside, we recognize them. They speak to a collective memory older than any individual life, a whisper that says, "We've been here before." And maybe, when the winds of time have scoured our cities clean, some distant people will stand among our remnants, piecing together who we were and asking themselves the same trembling question. Close your eyes for a moment. Let the weight of centuries settle around you like a soft blanket. Imagine the wind threading through hollow halls of stone, carrying whispers older than any written word. This is where we end our journey, not with answers carved in certainty, but with gentle questions that linger long after the last echo fades. Throughout this exploration, we have wandered across continents and epochs. We've traced lost roads through the jungles of the Amazon, stood in awe before monoliths so vast they humble our modern machines, and lingered over delicate carvings that seemed to capture the breath of vanished worlds. Each site we visited offered pieces of a puzzle we can never fully solve. And perhaps that is the truest gift of these mysteries. They free us from the tyranny of needing every fact pinned down, for what is history but a kind of shared dream? We gather stones, bones faded, pigments, and arrange them into stories that satisfy our longing to belong to something larger than ourselves. We chase these fragile threads backward through time, hoping they'll lead us to truths as solid as the rocks beneath our feet. Yet more often than not, we find only more shadow-soft outlines of lives we can't quite grasp. And isn't that beautifully human? To lean forward into the unknown, hoping to hear the faint murmur of those who came before, there is a humility in accepting that some things may forever elude us. The earth itself seems to conspire with forgetting. Roots split. Ancient temples, rivers bury cities beneath silt. Glaciers grind mountains to dust. Even the air plays its part, scouring inscriptions until they are little more than ghostly indentations. We like to think of time as a thief, stealing monuments and memories alike. But maybe time is also a tender keeper, folding these stories into itself until we are ready to dream them again. So as you rest now, let these places drift through your mind. Picture the giant spheres of Costa Rica glistening under tropical rain, half hidden by tangled vines. See the copper pits of Lake Superior, dark and yawning, silent witnesses to a labor whose purpose we no longer recall. Feel the hush of the Amazon canopy as it shelters geometric earthworks, the heartbeat of forgotten ceremonies still pulsing faintly beneath the soil. Let them come, not as rigid facts, but as living wonders that breathe with possibility. Perhaps you'll walk through the streets of Pavlopetri, that sunken Greek city where fish dart through doorways and light dances over stone. Thresholds last crossed thousands of years ago. Or maybe you'll find yourself among the silent megaliths of the Ural Mountains, feeling their cold mass beneath your fingertips, wondering whose hands set them there. Each place an invitation to marvel, to surrender certainty for a deeper, softer knowing, because at the edges of sleep we touch something that logic cannot reach. Our minds drift free from the need to catalog, to classify, to solve. In dreams, we stand shoulder to shoulder with the ancients, share feasts with strangers who speak in forgotten tongues, glimpse cities ablaze with starlight that no longer exists. The mysteries we studied tonight slip easily into this space. Here, a lantern can burn without fuel. Here, a face carved in rock can wink and turn to speak. Here, memory and myth are woven so tightly together we no longer see the seam. And so as you let go, let these mysteries be companions, not burdens. They do not demand resolution. They invite reverence. When you next wake, the questions may return. Who built this? Why did they leave? What secret did they bury in stone? But for now, allow yourself to simply wander, to trace the curves of an ancient wall, feel the echo of footsteps long vanished. Breathe in the dust of ages. The earth cradles countless stories, some told in the clear voice of archaeology, others murmured in riddles that dance just out of reach. We stand briefly upon this stage, heirs to both the known and the unknowable. It is not weakness to admit we do not hold all the answers. It is grace. For in that space where knowledge falters, wonder grows. So drift now, gently into the dream. Beyond memory, let the old stones watch over you, guardians of tales both remembered and lost. Let the rivers carry whispers from civilizations that once gleamed where now there is only shadow. Trust that the same yearning that drove us to build pyramids, temples, soaring cathedrals of stone and light still thrums in your own chest. And know that when you close your eyes, you are never far from those who came before. Rest easy then. The mysteries will keep. They have waited thousands of years already, patient as moss, silent as stars. Tomorrow they will still be there still, beckoning, still unanswered, still wondrous, and still, even as sleep gathers at the edges of your thoughts, the mind can't help but circle back to certain images. The towering trilithons of Baalbek, each stone impossibly vast, resting with such calm precision that it almost seems natural until you remember how even our greatest machines struggle to lift a fraction of that weight. Or the hidden terraces of Yonaguni, where divers swim through corridors that look suspiciously deliberate, their sharp angles slicing through blue silence like half-forgotten memories of a sunken metropolis. There's something profound in realizing how much of the world's story is written in a language we no longer speak. We stand on a planet that has been shaped and reshaped countless times, not just by tectonics and wind and water, but by hands like ours. Hands that dreamed, that planned, that labored under suns that set on a sky we would barely recognize. And yet so little remains of their voices. The builders left no diaries, no manifestos carved in stone. They trusted their monuments to be enough. Perhaps they were right. In the dark hush of night, with no crowds around to prod us forward, we finally have the stillness to truly listen, to sense the subtle resonance of old places, to imagine not just how they were made, but why. Did those who raised standing stones in concentric circles feel the same tremor in their chest that you do when you stand beneath towering arches? Did they tilt their heads to the heavens, hoping for answers from the same constellations that still wheel above us tonight? There's a sacred symmetry to it all. What was lost, what was found, what remains hidden. These mysteries are not merely puzzles to be solved, trophies for our intellect to mount. They are invitations to humility, to stand small beneath something vast, to accept that despite all our data, all our scanning tools and scholarly debates, we may never truly know. And that's not a failing, it's a kind of quiet grace, because in that unknowing, space opens up for wonder. Wonder that maybe the copper mine so feverishly near Lake Superior ended up glinting on the necks of queens across an ocean. Wonder that perhaps elephants once wandered South America, or that ancient mariners charted courses long before our textbooks allow. Wonder that the earth itself might remember things in its bones that we have long since forgotten. Close your eyes tighter now. Picture yourself drifting through a forest thick with shadow. Between the trees, half swallowed by roots, stand walls, so old they bleed into the stone beneath them. Who lived here? Who laughed here? Who wept? Who fell in love beneath these same branches? Their names are gone, but some tender essence remains, woven into the soil, into the sigh of wind through leaves. If you listen closely, the land itself seems to breathe. And then imagine a lantern burning softly in a ruined hall, its glow unfed by oil or wick. No heat radiates from it, only a gentle, unwavering light. What kept it alive? A trick of chemistry? An artifact of some long-lost science? Or perhaps it was never meant to be explained, only witnessed, only carried forward as a story to be whispered from one generation to the next. This is what we inherit. Echoes. And yet how rich they are, how stirring. They remind us that for all our maps and measurements, life is not fully captured by lines on paper. It blooms in the spaces between facts, in the hush that falls when words fail. Maybe that's why we build stories around these ancient enigmas, to stitch ourselves back into a tapestry that feels impossibly large, to reassure ourselves that we belong to something enduring, something that spans not just continents, but epochs. Each ruin is a small promise that the human urge to reach beyond ourselves toward gods, toward stars, toward mysteries we'll never solve, is older than any monument, and just as unbreakable. So let yourself wander there, even now, as dreams start to gather. Picture stepping barefoot across mossy stones, feeling the cold bite of history against your skin. Imagine passing through shadowed archways, down corridors lined with silent watchers, into chambers lit by a glow that needs no source. Let questions come, let them swirl and settle without ever demanding answers, because this is not about solving puzzles. It's about standing quietly in the presence of something larger than any one life. It's about honoring this simple truth. That some stories are too vast, too delicate, to be pinned down by certainty. They live better in the twilight spaces, half seen, half guessed, entirely alive. And tomorrow, when you wake and the rational world reclaims you with its bright edges and sharp clocks, these places will still be there. The earth will still cradle its secrets. Stones will still stand stacked upon stone. Rivers will still run past sunken plazas. Forests will still guard geometric earthworks beneath their emerald canopies, waiting, patient, unmoved by our need to explain. So rest now. Let the hush of countless forgotten songs cradle you, the way a mother hums her child to sleep. Somewhere deep within, the old stones keep watch, bearing witness as they always have.